So I wanted to. So one thing is looking at all this stuff and looking at the Bolt API, but you're probably wondering, how does this fit within the overall concepts of Ucommerce? And I think the best way of seeing that is just by seeing how we went ahead and implemented it in Avenue Clothing, so you get a sense of how that's done. So what we did is we have Bolt, right, as a query API, and what we found using it in Avenue Clothing is that it's actually fairly easy to work with. So I just wanted to see if I can find the query somewhere. I think, was it here? Nope. Was it there? Yes. Right here, right? So this is basically what Bolt looks like in action, right? So it's not a lot of code, and basically we're simplifying queries quite a bit because it's in index. So queries are super duper easy to do, but of course there's some ceremony that needs to be observed because we need to get to a point where this information is within the index. Each index is based on language, so you'll have, for the product index, as many versions of that as you have languages, and within that index you'll have all the prices indexed as well. In the first version of Bolt, those prices will be the list prices found within the backend, so they will not be modified by Marketing Foundation in a way. That will still happen as a second step as you display. And we realize this is not an optimum situation. Ideally, we'd like to get to a point where we just pick a value out of the index and it would be sort of the current price. But in the interest of time, we had to sort of slice and dice it somewhere. So part of the next quarter is also looking at how we can speed up Marketing Foundation using this stuff. But for now, it just simplifies greatly the search bit. And you'll notice here that if I make this an explicit variable, if I can, I can't. But what it's returning is basically what we call a result set of product, and not product index, just a product. And the idea here is that this model here is not the product model that you're familiar with. This is actually one of those return models we talked about before. So if I jump to that, you will see that it's very, very simple. Oh shit. You'll see that it's a simple thing, right? It doesn't have any ability to traverse relationships or anything like that. Whenever for products and its variants, you'll notice here you can still get a list of categories. You can still get a list of related products and variants and things like that, but they are GUIDs, right? So to load a product and its variants at the moment, you would have to issue a query for the product and then a second query for the variants. We did investigate some block joins, I think it was called, and things like that, but it's a concept being deprecated. So bringing back additional information related to what you're doing is not really advised. So this is just to give you a sense of how we're thinking. We're dealing with very simple values, but it also means that querying is super simple. You don't have to deal with languages in here. As you'll notice, there's no multilingual fields or anything like that, because this will be a language version of this particular product. So if you have a multilingual field like display name, it will be in English or Danish or Swedish or whatever. And if you want another language version of it, you will have to switch index to another one. You'll also notice that we have all the prices in here, right here. And the idea there is that for every price group, we are currently naively just adding adding this into the index. We are aware that this model will not hold up in a B2B scenario with thousands of price groups, and we're addressing that later on. So we just want to get the default scenarios working great, and then we'll sort of get back to it, because there's no doubt that we are going to need these prices within the index for faceting and things like that. So they're here, right? And then we need some auxiliary indexes to deal with tiered pricing or things like that. But for now, it'll work very similarly to how we do it in Raven, if you're familiar with that. You'll also notice a little bit of a change here with the slug. So these slugs are being introduced everywhere in the solution. I think Tim will be very happy to see this. This is for URL rewriting or generating URLs for the catalog. So basically the products, categories and catalogs will start to have these slots associated with them that represents how they should look in the URL. So we're doing away with the P dash and C dash and C dash in the URLs. It's just going to be a nice URL. I think this is something that's going to make everybody very happy. These slots will be multilingual, of course. So there's an all new way of dealing with URLs. For V1, we aim to do a prettier version of what we have today. So we still have the challenge with canonical URLs that you're familiar with. We still have the challenge of URLs that change and doing 402 and things like that. That's exactly the same as before. You still have to manage that however you did it before. The goal is to actually provide a URL catalog of sorts that will enable us to keep track of any URLs that we had and make 201s and canonicals and all that. But it's like a whole little thing in of itself that we want to make sure we get absolutely right. So we're not doing it for now. We're just prettifying what we have. I hope that makes sense. Now, one other thing to note is that the catalog libraries are still there, right? You will notice up here. So what we're doing here is we're doing away with the static methods that you're familiar with. So back in the original versions of Ucommerce, you would be able to just go catalog library dot and then boom, boom, boom. But the reason we did that was because inversion of control and dependency injection wasn't really that prevalent when we designed these APIs. So we didn't want to sort of bother you with it. However, these days in ASP.NET Core and in ASP.NET Proper, well, not proper anymore, but you know what I'm talking about. DI is just part of the game, right? And it's part of Umbraco as well. So the libraries are now interface based, and you do have to resolve them. The idea is that right now we haven't done it, but the idea is that you will be able to ask for them to be injected in the controllers. So you just say, I want the iCatalog library within this particular controller, and off you go. So it should be fairly seamless. We just didn't get to that part yet. So for now, we're just doing it like this, but it's just to give you a sense of how that works. You can also see how we get at an index. So basically, we have an index of whatever, and you will get the default version. And of course, you can go ahead and name them by ID as well if you have multiple product indexes. For now, we just have the one, so you'll get the default one. Looking at the catalog library here. Okay, that's annoying. Maybe it's because of this. How about now? Nope. You will notice that there's a slight change in the way that we're dealing with that. So the catalog library is there to, as always, to make sure that you have an easy way of doing simple things, right? So it doesn't do anything, or it doesn't do everything, but it does do, you know, some of the core things. And really, what it's all about is wrapping some of the queries you're going to use all the time, right? Like loading a catalog, like getting the root categories for a catalog, and things like that. You'll notice here that they are now GUID based, so whenever we can, we try and avoid using actual models or complex types, because everything is just identified by GUID these days. However, you'll see later on in the transaction ladder that we did have to do a little bit. You'll notice here that we do have models, right? So the product model I showed you before, we also have the product catalog model, catalog group, and category. We did this, we don't really require the models in both, but we did it for convenience here because we have to return something. And if we don't sort of call it something, it would just be a hash table of stuff, which sucks. So we went ahead and introduced default models, which look the way you just saw. What we anticipate will happen here is that most of the time, you'll probably just use our default models. But over time, you might want to inherit our models and just have a specialized version that does more stuff, or maybe is more appropriate for the domain you're trying to solve. So you can do that, and I think it's going to be pretty good. There is one thing here for prices. So we are still calculating prices like before, but we're doing away with the ability of calculating one price for a product. Now you have to calculate multiple prices for a product because it is a very costly operation. So we want to make sure you get the most bang for the buck. So you have to provide a list of GUIDs here for the price calculation. So there's still an extension point there you can look into and override. There's still an opportunity to modify the behavior. However, it is accessed in a slightly different way. All right, and it's important for me to say, as part of this as well, that the old catalog library is dead. It's removed from the platform. RavenDB, it will be removed from the platform, so it will not be there. There will be no legacy code that you can get at for your solutions. You have to transition. However, the good news is that it's fairly easy to do, because the concepts are the same. You just have to sort of model them a little bit. So what we found in transitioning from Avenue Clothing into the new APIs was basically that we used many of the same names, so that was fine. But most of the change had to happen in the mapping between the view model and the model returned, the return model from Ucommerce. So it was actually not so bad. It was more the challenge for us was more because we were actually building the platform as we were doing it. So yeah, there's that. So it's just the same. The structure remains the same. We have the catalog library. We also still have context classes, as you can tell right here. We are remodeling that a little bit on how that's being populated. Right now, it's still being populated internally, but we want to introduce a pipeline that does that, so you can actually hook into the population process in a little more predictable way. And it's basically just there for convenience. You don't have to use this state. Catalog library, as you saw, does actually have ability to work with GUIDs or not. So if you call get catalog without a GUID, you're just going to get the catalog in the context, right? It's just to keep it very sort of similar to what you have before, but you don't have to use the context. You can just not do it and just call it with GUIDs all the time and manage state yourself. But it does make the code much shorter when we do it like this. Let's see, one last thing that I wanted to show you is was it here? Maybe it was the product controller, I think. Where are the variants? Oh, you'll see that in a little bit as we get into the structure. So just to sum up, context APIs still there, but they're simpler, much simpler. They will be populated from a pipeline going forward. Catalog library is still there. It's a new version. The models are new for that. Transaction library is still there. It's actually exactly the same as before. It's using the old models. Orders still go to SQL Server. They're not stored in an index anywhere, something like that. So they just work together. Marketing library is the same. Search library is also transitioned to Bolt. So that's also all new. I'm debating a little bit whether to keep search library around or not, because it does look a little dumb. But basically what we're doing is we are dissecting what we're learning here today from you guys tomorrow, and we are dissecting what we've learned in Avenue Clothing, and we are making some final adjustments on the APIs tomorrow, just to make sure that it's sort of as clean as possible. So this is a pipe up if there's something you're not happy with. This is a great opportunity to fix it. And so that's a question from Lars. Will the models be serializable or will they be transformed? They will be very serializable. I think they even have, well, they used to have a contract on it, but they are really just, they're not connected to the database at all. They're just a very simple, they're almost like a view model. They are actually like a view model. Come on. So yes, they should be very easy to serialize. Any other questions?